Okay, welcome back. So what might these structures look like? There's all different types of structural frames, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I do find this rather interesting, and maybe it helps you think about your organization and the ways you think about it from a structural frame or a bureaucratic frame. So when we think about this, we oftentimes recognize the fact that Mintzberg talks about these sort of structural configurations. He talks about the idea that there's a strategic apex. Like every organization has some form of these different elements. So you have the strategic apex. These are the directors or the senior executives. You have the operating core. This carries out the activities necessary to deliver the inputs. So a lot of times this is where the talent is, the product is. It's what like the product that the organization delivers, and they need that, right? There's the middle line. These are the link between the strategic apex and the operating core. Usually this is the place of managers and things like that. You have the technical structure. These are the individuals and teams working in functions such as human resources, training, finance, planning. So they're not necessarily part of like the actual product that's maybe being produced, but the technostructure makes it happen. It's the admin side of everything that's going on. And then you have the support staff, and this functions as sort of research and development, public relations, legal services. They're the ones that are supporting the organization in some sort of way, that have to deal with sort of the adjacent possible activities that are happening up there as well. Now, there's different forms of different structures, okay? So you have the simple structure where you have basically what you're producing, and then a small group of people that are sort of the executives that are sort of leading this. This is often sort of an entrepreneurial organization. This is where they're just starting off. They don't have a lot of staff or structure, but they know what they produce, and there's a few of them producing it, okay? Then you have the machine bureaucracy, and this is defined by standardization. The organization is getting a little bit bigger. The people that started the organization can't do it all. So then they have managers that are sort of working there. They have support staff. They have different pieces that are sort of making the process work in a more efficient way so that the leaders can keep leading. And then you have these other structures along the way. There's also something called the professional bureaucracy. This is what schools look like, okay? Like if you were to go to a college, like the professional bureaucracy is basically academe, right? You have a president and some key leaders. You have support staff or administration. You've got you've got legal and other maybe marketing elements associated with that. But the talent, the think tank, the publishing, the teaching is done by the faculty. So that's sort of large, as you see in this particular picture. There is divisionalized form where you have divisions within divisions, right? So you have multiple layers of managers associated with that. As an organization gets bigger, or if it's in multiple locations, this is where you have a really diversified organization that needs to sort of manage this at a much more complex level. And then you have an adhocracy, which is kind of like everybody's kind of doing everything. There isn't necessarily a sense of organization. It's like an all hands on deck. We're going to get it done. And I think you see this sometimes with startups as well, or maybe in a bad situation, disorganized organizations, sometimes in churches where everyone's just kind of doing their thing, but we don't necessarily have a sense of clarity associated with that. So maybe one of these frames looks a little bit like your particular church. I don't really know. But as we think about different denominations at different churches, there's lots of ways to think about this. Like a lot of times the typical leadership structure in a lot of evangelicals looks like this. And it's sort of modeled after a modern corporate structure. You have the senior pastor, you've got who's sort of leading, you have the elders, worship pastor, youth pastor, and then maybe there's an associate pastor that's overseeing staff with regards to support staff, or maybe a unique part of ministry, right? So it kind of looks like this. They look differently, but it kind of is adapted toward that. There's all types of structures, though. Like there's the typical church pyramid, right? Where you've got maybe the pastor, the deacons, the elders, the members. Your tradition, it might look different. Some of you might be like, oh my gosh, it should be upside down because the pastor serves everybody else. There's lots of ways to think about that. But you sort of have, again, this division of later, which the way that your organization is set up probably defines a lot of the ways that it operates, right? Then here's First Presbyterian in Allentown. I just really like this. Here's an example of like a massive structure, right? Like, where are you on this? Try to find yourself. Like youth pastor, you're probably like bottom left. I don't really know, but like this can be overwhelming, right? Like as an individual, like who do I talk to? Even in structures like this, sometimes you can feel really alone. And in some ways, maybe because this is a bigger ministry, it just needs sort of this bigger structure, right? There's also like a congregationalist church is going to look more like this, right? Where the community is led by the people, and this is the way it's perceived. And so when you make decisions, it's not about one leader making it, it's actually this collective nature. So this has an effect on the way decisions are made, the way the church or denomination responds to change, right? The structure actually has an effect on that. An Episcopal church may look well like this. You've got the archbishop, the bishops, the priests, and then the communities, right? So there's a structure about the ways responsibility is deviated and how people respond to that. You have a Presbyterian church that has the General Assembly, the presbytery, the session, and all that comes with that, right? Presbyterians, you love meetings, it's awesome. But there's a structure here that has an effect on the way we think about theology, the positions that we take on social issues, like who is ultimately responsible for that, and how do congregations operate within this, right? In some ways, what I like Presbyterian expressions or other denominations that have structures like this, it often provides a tremendous amount of comfort for congregations that don't have to sort of have positions on everything, because there's someone else thinking about that, and so they can trust the experts in higher up to actually help them negotiate some of those maybe positions, right? It also can be frustrating because maybe what the higher ups are taking a position on isn't necessarily how the congregations feel about that. And this is where we have denominational splits and things going on with many of you, I think, are probably experiencing right now. What's interesting as well is that if the structure is more flat, especially if you're like an evangelical church, like and sort of independent, you have to feel and think about policy at a much more dramatic level because there isn't anybody to appeal to. And so oftentimes this means you have to do a lot more thinking about those positions or theologies that you're holding to or not holding to, or how you're negotiating that. When I worked at my church in Grand Rapids, Mars Hill, this was our structure. We actually had different ways to think about this, that there was an executive elder team and an elder team that sort of oversaw some things, but they were all part of these different actionable teams of nominating people for leadership, missions and outreach, pastoral care, operations, theology and teaching, and vision casting. And then we had our pastoral team that had a team leader and the ministry leader team, the MLT, which I was a part of. And then we had all these different ministries. So this was our way to try to kind of find a way forward where we really valued in our church the sense of collaboration, the sense of grassroots, this sense of plurality of perspectives to make decisions, and to do it in such a way that it would actually be actionable. Now, the beauty of this structure was, I think it was much more collaborative. And when we made decisions, I think there was a consensus that was really helpful. The downside is that things just took longer. Like I couldn't run off and do something. There was actually a process by which we went through because we wanted to make sure that people were on the same page as we moved forward. So I wonder how you would draw your organization or your church. I wonder what that would look like. So here's just some self-questions to think about when it comes to church and ministry organizations. What kind of structure is your church or ministry organization? How would you describe it? How would you draw it? From a structural frame, what's good and challenging about your organization when it comes to structure? What do you need? What's getting in the way, right? And where do you think you fit in that structure? Like if you were to draw this out and then kind of say, I am here, how does that feel? What does that do to you as you think about your role? Do you feel empowered? Do you feel disempowered? What with it brings a sense of comfort as you think about clarity, and at the same time, what frustrations come there as well? Again, these things aren't good or bad. It's just that when we look at things through the structural frame, maybe it begins to give language to why I'm relieved, frustrated, I don't know how to move this idea forward. I'm not sure who to talk with. Or I'm really happy for my supervisor because, right? Like the structural frame gives us some views to sort of take stock in like how I'm thinking about my own role, and then how perhaps I'm trying to make decisions as I lead the particular area that's been entrusted to me. So that's the structural frame. I hope that gives you some looks and some creative ways to think about that. We're going to continue to turn these frames because the structural frame is just one frame of other frames that we can use to negotiate and interpret and think about the spaces that we're leading and working.